So I'm going in there and doing these piss tests and everything, and it's working out pretty good. I'm able to smoke weed every week and clean out my system before I got to go in and do these pee tests. So this is probably going on about 3 or 4 months. You know, I'm doing this. I'm still partying on the side, drinking, smoking weed, just doing whatever. Just making sure that I'm cleaning out my system before I have to go do a piss test for the probation office. And you know, I think it's 5 weeks straight they piss test me. 5 weeks in a row. So every week I go in there and they pee test me. And sometimes it was random. So sometimes they would ask for a piss test and then sometimes they wouldn't. And I was paying close attention to the schedule, because sometimes they piss test you 2 or 3 times in a row and then they lay off and wouldn't piss test you. And it's just all random. So they had 5 weeks straight in a row that they were piss testing me. And so I left after that 5th time, and I says, well, you know what, I don't think they're gonna piss test me a 6th time. You know, that's just too much. You know, they'll probably give me a break. So that week I didn't clean out my system. I smoked all the way up until Friday when I had to go take my piss test. And I went in there on Friday just thinking that they weren't gonna piss test me. And but sure enough, they said, well, Justin, your name come up this week, we're gonna need a piss test. And I start freaking out. I was just like, oh man, my heart sunk and everything. And I told the guy, well, I can't pee right now. Maybe let me sit here and drink some water so I can pee. And he's all, yeah, whatever. He's all, you got like an hour to do it. And so I sat there and I drank like 6 or 7 cups of water, just downing them. And I thought maybe if I drink a lot of water in that short amount of time, maybe it would clean me out. So I downed all that water, and I went in the bathroom, and I was trying to pee, and I couldn't pee, but I had to throw up. So I threw up in the toilet. And then the guy's all, you alright? You alright? And I said, yeah, I don't know, I'm just not feeling well right now. And you know, back in these days, I was on all kinds of drugs. I was way out there. And I said, yeah, I'm just sick or whatever. It'll be fine. Just let me drink another cup of water and give it about 10 minutes. I should be able to pee. So I drank another cup of water, and then I was able to take a piss. And so I peed in the cup, and they test it right there on the spot. They don't have to send it to no lab or nothing. There's like a stick that they used to throw in it, and they would tell them right within like minutes if you had marijuana in your system or not. And he tested on the spot, and sure enough, I came up positive for marijuana. So he said, well, you tested positive on this one. And I said, so what does that mean? And he says, well, what's going to happen is they're going to revoke your probation, and you're going to have to go do your 45 days in jail because you violated your probation. And he's all, I would just recommend that you go down to the police department and turn yourself into the county jail. He said, and get your time done with, because that's all you can really do right now since you already violated your probation. And I said, alright, sounds good. So he let me go, and you know, just under the assumption that I was going to go and turn myself in. And so I didn't tell my mom, didn't tell nobody, you know, kind of deal. I just played it off like nothing was wrong, you know. I'm still doing good on probation. I'm trying to do what I can do or whatever, you know, kind of deal. And so about 2 or 3 months passed, and I never turned myself in. You know, I was just being hard-headed. I still want to smoke and, you know, do whatever I had to do, but I didn't want to go and do my time for some reason. And so one day I was sitting there in my living room at my mom's house, and I think I was playing a video game or something, and I was smoking a bong sitting there on the couch right in the living room. Took a few hits of weed, sitting there playing that video game, getting all stoned. And then in the video game, we had it up loud, you know, so you could hear people shooting each other and all that kind of stuff. And then next thing you know, we heard a knock on the door. Doom, 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 doom. And I was like, oh. So I paused the game. and I was just listening. And I snuck up and looked out the peephole, and you could see it was 2 police officers. And I was just like, man. And I was just trying to be as quiet as I could, hoping that they would leave. And sure enough, they just left a piece of paper on the door and they left. You know, they knocked a couple times and that was it. They left. And after they left, I opened up the door and got the piece of paper and closed the door. And I started reading it, and it was actually, it was a piece of paper stating that they were looking for me and that I had to turn myself in for a probation violation. And so right there and then on the spot, I noticed, I says, you know, I'm such an idiot. You know, I'm sitting over here smoking weed. It's obvious they could smell it, you know, because I'm doing bong hits right here in my living room. And they're right there at the door. It's obvious that they could smell it. There's no way that they couldn't smell it. And so I just come to grips with myself, and I just says, you know, this running from the cops and everything is so stupid. I just need to go down and do my time and get this over with, you know. And so I talked to my mom and told her, you know, I failed a piss test, you know, a month or so ago, and that I was going to decide to turn myself in and do my time so I get taken care of. And so she said, all right, sounds good. And so the deal with that was, since I already violated my probation, I just had to go do my 45 days in jail, and then I was completely off of probation, you know, didn't even have to resume it or nothing. And so I went down to the jail. My mom took me down there, and I turned myself in, you know. Turned myself in and booked me in and everything like that. And at this time, I had real long hair. I had hair all the way down to my butt, you know. Tied it back in a ponytail. And I was about 5'11", but I was really skinny. I was only about 125, 130 pounds maybe. And so I went in there to serve my time, and I had to do 45 days. Well, when I was in there, you know, as soon as I walked into my pod, I recognized some of my friends that I haven't seen in a while. They were in jail there too. So I was all thinking, well, this ain't too bad. At least I have some of my friends here, you know, I could hang out with. But they put me in a juvenile pod because I was only like 17 years old and had to do 45 days in there. And you know, I was still acted like a little badass, like a little punk kid, and you know, try to act all hard because, you know, that's kind of the way I was raised and molded growing up with my brother and all his people, and just the kind of life that I lived. And so even when I was in jail, I got in a couple fights with some guys, you know, just to prove to people I wasn't no punk, and they didn't treat me like no pushover because I stood up for myself. And you know, it's just juvenile jail, but it was still jail. So I went in there, done my time and everything like that, and just going through the motions. Well, they put me in this one cell, and I was all by myself, you know. And this juvenile pod was pretty small. There's probably like 20, 30 cells in the whole deal. Well, they put me in an upstairs pod all by myself, and, you know, it was fine, you know, whatever. And I actually liked the jail food. You know, as weird as that sounds, I did like it because my mom always cooked for me. She always fed me, but some of her meals were kind of bland to me. And I wasn't always up to eating anyways all the time because I was always on all kinds of drugs. And you know, people say when you do marijuana, you know, you get the munchies and stuff like that. But I was kind of different. When I was on marijuana, I was so stoned out I didn't want to eat or nothing. I just want to play video games or listen to music or whatever, you know, zone out kind of deal. So actually I enjoyed eating the food there, and I put on a little bit of weight while I was there. And the cell that I was staying in, some of the guys told me one day, they says, oh yeah, you know, that cell that you're staying in, a kid hung himself there 2 weeks before you come into this pod. I said, really? And they said, oh yeah, he hung himself. I guess he couldn't take it, so he just killed himself in there. And I was like, oh, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal, so let's just brush it off. And so I served my time, served my 45 days, and what's really crazy about jail and everything is right before I turned myself in to go to jail, I had some weed still. Like, you know, like I say, that those cops come to serve me papers when I was smoking a bong in the living room. Well, before I went to turn myself into jail, I think I had like a half ounce of weed or something like that. So I stashed it in my closet, and I figured, you know, I'd stash it, hide it there, and then when I get out of jail, I'd have something to smoke. That's the kind of way I was thinking back then. So I served my 45 days in jail. You know, my brother and my mom, they come to visit me a couple times, and it was no big deal, you know, 45 days, 45 days. So after 45 days gets done and over with, you know, they let me out of jail, and my mom's there to pick me up, you know, and I'm happy to be out. And when I was coming out the pod, one of the officers told me, he says, we'll see you back here again. And I says, you know what, you ain't gonna see me back here again, because I'm gonna change my life. I told him that, and he was just like, yeah, sure, you know, kind of deal. So, and that kind of stuck with me for a little bit, because I didn't want to be locked in a cage, you know, and sitting in jail for the rest of my life. I wanted to do something with my life, even though at the time my life was totally messed up. So my mom picked me up from jail, you know, I was all happy to get out of jail and whatever. So she drove me, my mom drove me back home, and I was happy to be out, you know, and my mom's boyfriend was there, my mom was there, my brother come by. As soon as I got home, took a shower, shaved, done whatever, and I got my weed out, and I started rolling some doobies and loading up some bowls and smoking a little bit. And I was all blazed, you know, because I haven't smoked in a while. Well, I didn't have to worry about having dirty piss anymore, because I was off probation after that 45 days in jail. And so it's like, well, what's next kind of deal. And so I'm just enjoying life, you know, going through the motions. And right about that time, I noticed my mom, she got a new neighbor that moved in next door. And I was looking like, who's this gal that moved in next door? And she was like a Latina chick, probably about 29 years old. Good looking Latina chick too. She had a couple kids, and I just think, man, she's a pretty good looking Latina chick, you know. So, and it's funny because later on down the road, I think a few weeks later after that, I end up getting a job as a dishwasher, you know, just something to do, you know. And I knew I wasn't going to make a lot of money or whatever, but my mom was like, you dropped out of school and you just got out of jail, you might as well get yourself a job. So I went and got a job as a dishwasher at a little restaurant, and they didn't pay much money. It was like $5 an hour or whatever, and they were only working me like 3 hours, 2 nights a week, so it's like for the whole week like 6 hours, you know, and maybe a couple hours on Sunday. It wasn't hardly nothing. And so after a whole month's worth of working, I think I got a check for like $260 or something, and it's just like, this job is nothing. But you know, I kept working it just for something to do. Well, after working there as a dishwasher for a while, you know, I wasn't doing all kinds of LSD anymore. I kind of backed off all that kind of stuff, you know, and I was just trying to go to work and smoke a little bit of weed here and there, and maybe drink a little bit, but not get too wild. And then one day, one of my friends calls me up and he says, "Hey man, do you want to go party?" I says, "Where, dude?" I says, we could go party or whatever, you know, I don't care, you know, but I don't want to go to no big old party or nothing. He's like, "Oh, there's a party right next door to you." And I says, "What are you talking about?" And he says, "Yeah, there's this chick I met, and she lives right next door to you, and she's having a party tonight." And I didn't know what he's talking about. I think, well, maybe he's talking about that Latina chick. Sure enough, he comes over, we get ready and everything like that, and we go next door to that Latina chick's house. And he knew that Latina chick, her name was Jennifer. He knew one of her friends And that's how he knew that chick or whatever. She invited us over there for the party. So we went and hung out with her, and you know, long story short, me and her end up getting into some extracurricular activities, you know, and I was 17, she was like 29 or whatever. Started having sexual relationships with her or whatever. But it's real crazy because my mom didn't know nothing about it, and I didn't tell hardly nobody. Just one of my friends, he's the only one that really knew about it. And so I'd sneak over there once in a while to do whatever, you know, kind of deal. But so that went on for about 3 or 4 months. And after about 3 or 4 months, you know, I looked outside, and you know, because she would call once in a while or whatever, she would just call my phone. And this is back when we all had house phones. Like, we didn't have no pagers or we didn't have no cell phones or nothing like that. We just had house phones. She'd call my house phone once in a while, and that's when I knew it was time to go over there. Well, she wasn't calling. I didn't see her car out there for like a couple days, and I was thinking, where's this chick at? You know, what's going on with this chick? You know, because I haven't heard nothing from her, you know. So like 2 days go by, and then 3 days go by, and nothing. And then next thing you know, my friend Curtis calls me and he says, hey man, I got some news to tell you. And I said, what? What happened? And he says, you remember that Jennifer girl, your next door neighbor? I said, yeah. He says her and her friend got in a car accident over the weekend, coming home from the bars, and they rolled their car a few times, and she died. She died in the car accident. And I said, no way. You know, my heart kind of sunk. Because at the time I was kind of catching feelings for her, but it wasn't like nothing like I was dating her or nothing, you know. It's just I didn't want nothing bad to happen to nobody. And my mind was kind of blown. It's just like, wow, I can't believe this. This is crazy. So yeah, she ended up dying in a car accident, and that's the last of, you know, hearing anything about her. And her family moves all the stuff out of her house and everything like that, and that's the end of that. And so moving on forward, right about this time, you know, I quit working there I quit working washing dishes at that place because they weren't paying nothing, and I started doing construction jobs here and there. You know, sometimes from my grandpa, or sometimes from, I just got in the phone book one day and started calling concrete companies. And I ran into this one concrete company, and he says, you know anything about concrete? And I says, yeah, I know a little bit, you know, whatever. I'm general labor, I could just do whatever. And so he hired me to do some concrete jobs. We were doing driveways, sidewalks, or just whatever, you know, whatever he had. And he was paying me alright. He was like, maybe $10 back then, you know. And I was going along with that, but that's like seasonal work. And next thing you know, the season cut down, slowed down, and he didn't have any more work for me. So he said, I don't have no more work for you. So I just sat around the house and just kind of looked for jobs every day, or whatever I could find. And I didn't really find any jobs. And so I'm just hanging out, you know, and probably like 3 or 4 months goes by, and one of my friends, Eddie, he was working at a car wash, and he would always come over, smoke weed once in a while, and he would say, hey man, he says, why don't you come work at the car wash with me? And I would laugh at him. I was like, dude, I ain't washing no cars. I said, they probably don't even pay nothing anyways, probably like $5 an hour. And he's like, yeah, but you know, we get paid once a week, we get tips every night, you know, da da da. And I wasn't even trying to hear it. I was like, I don't want nothing to do with that dude. And so whatever little money I did have, I would buy a little bit of weed and try to sell it or whatever. So even though I was in trouble for marijuana like 2 times, you know, I was still selling weed, you know, being stupid, you know. And so I'd just sell weed, but he would always come over and say, oh man, you need to just come work at the car wash. Just come, dude. I could get you a job, this and that. And I was never trying to hear it. And like, he bugged me like 4 or 5 times. And finally one day I says, you know what, dude? Let's go. Let's go. You know, whatever. You're going to bug me this much about getting a damn job. Let's go. And so we went to the car wash, and they hired me right away, and it was only like $5.15 an hour. And we get tips at the end of the night. Some days they were like $4 or $5. Some days maybe $20. But it was something, you know. At least I had a job, you know, whatever. And so I worked at the car wash for about 6 months. And then after the car wash, there was another shop right across the street, and that was called like Lightning Lube. It was like a Jiffy Lube or Grease Monkey. And we knew some guys over there, and they said, why don't you come over here, you'll make more money. We're paying $8 an hour, da 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 da. And I was like, yeah, you know. So I went in to talk to my boss one day, and I was already there like 6 months. And I says, hey man, is there any way I could get more money working here? And he's all, oh, I really can't. I can't give you a raise. And I says, well, you know, if you can't raise me up, I says I could go work construction or something like that, making $10, $12 an hour, you know. If you're not going to give me any kind of raise, you know, I might as well not even stay around. And he's all right, man, I'm sorry to see you go, but business is business. And so I quit that very day. Like, I didn't give him a 2 weeks notice or anything. I just said, okay, well, we'll see, you know. And so, like, I think it was like the next day or two, I was already working across the street at Lightning Lube. And so was my friend Eddie. Eddie was working there too at Lightning Lube. So Eddie went over to Lightning Lube before I did. And then I just kind of followed him over there because they were already making the money over there. And when I started working at Lightning Lube, Eddie was only there for like maybe 2 or 3 days, and then he got a job working for some power plant in Wheatland, Wyoming. And they were starting him out like $20 an hour or something. And he had a big plan, you know, to make a lot of money and save his money and do something with his life. And I was like, that's right on, at least he's doing something with his life. And so I continued working at Lightning Lube, and I worked there for about maybe 2 months at the most. And I was just like, this ain't cutting it either, you know. $8 an hour is nothing, you know. And then I wasn't even really making 40 hours a week. Some weeks 20, 24 hours, or just whatever, you know. It wasn't really nothing. It was pretty comparable to the car wash. And so this whole time while I'm at Lightning Lube, Eddie only lasted at the power plant like 3 weeks. He ended up doing a dirty piss test too for marijuana, and they kicked him straight out of there. And so he lost a damn good job at a young age just for a dirty piss test. And me and Eddie, we were smoking a lot of weed together too, you know, doing a lot of dumb stuff too. And you know, even working at Lightning Lube and the car wash together, there's a few times me and Eddie even got into meth a little bit here and there, you know. It wasn't like an everyday thing, but, you know, we would do some meth here and there, you know, when we had some extra money, but it wasn't like no heavy addiction or nothing like that, but we still fooled around with it. And so after Lightning Lube, we left Lightning Lube, and Eddie got a job with some construction company called 3 Sons Construction. And they were paying him like, I think $14 an hour or something, $13 an hour. And they were working him like 5'10", 6'10" sometimes. So he was doing alright, you know, not too bad. And that's the reason why I left Lightning Lube, because Eddie says, why don't you come over here to 3 Sons Construction, dude, and I get you on. So I followed him over there at 3 Sons Construction, started making money over there. And that was seasonal work too. We were building bridges and stuff like that. Tying all kinds of rebar and putting up farms to pour concrete bridges and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Some kind of curb and gutter and just whatever. Curb and gutter up in the mountains and just whatever. So they were paying us pretty decent and everything like that. Well, I stayed working there for like probably a month and a half. And I started getting to the point where I wasn't waking up on time. I'd go in late a couple times. Some days I'd call in. And I think the second day I called in, the guy says, we don't need you anymore. just come pick up your check. And I was like, well, whatever. And so, and at this time I was still back selling weed already. So I called my brother up and I says, hey man, can you take me to go pick up my check? You know, I got laid off of that job. I need to go pick up my check. He's all right, I'll swing by. So during this time, my grandfather already sold his apartment complex, and he bought a couple houses on the west side, 2 houses that were right next to each other, and he stayed in one and my brother stayed in the other. He would always take care of my brother like that. And so they were living there in those houses, and so my brother comes to pick me up, and we're driving there, and I went to go pick up my paycheck, and I brought some weed with me. You know, pretty stupid deal, but that's just how I was. I didn't care, you know. I figured, you know, I was gonna bring it with me so I could smoke with my brother at his house. Well, I had like 2.5 ounces worth of weed with me. I put it in my pocket, put a scale in my pocket. I had about $600 in my pocket, and I was on my way to go pick up my check. So he takes me over there to that construction company to go pick up my check. And I get my check, and I'm heading back to his house, and I figure I'll just cash it some other day or whatever because I had enough money on me. So on the way to his house, we're driving on the west side of town, and we see one of my Uncle Daniel's friends, and he's kind of an alcoholic dude, but we really like him. His name's Michael. And so we stopped by, picked him up. We said, hey, you need a ride? He's like, yeah, give me a ride. He's like, why don't you go by? So I get me a 40 ounce. So we swing by a liquor store, get him a 40 ounce, and then we're driving back towards my brother's house. And he's drinking on the way. He just has no patience at all, you know, tipping it up, drinking it and everything. Well, next thing you know, we get pulled over because he's sitting there drinking his beer. Well, the cop comes up and looks at all of us, and he just looks at me and my brother. We both have long hair all the way down to our butts, and we're all, you know, got tattoos and all G'd out and just like, you know, up to no good. And, you know, so the cop, he gives my uncle's friend, he just gives him a warning about drinking the beer, you know, while we're driving. And then he looks at us and he says, you guys got anything on you? And we're like, no. And he's all, why don't you step out the car? We're going to search you guys. And back then they had probable cause. So if they just thought that you had something on you, they could search your car or whatever. And so they pulled us out of the SUV and they start searching us. And I knew right away, I knew they were going to find my weed. But I thought, I'm not going to throw it underneath my brother's seat because then he'll take the rap for it. And I don't want to run. I'm tired of running, you know. I'm not going to run anymore. And so they pat me down and they find my weed, they find my scales, they find my money, they find the check. And I was like, there's nothing I can do about it now. So they give me a ticket and everything, and they said, you got to appear on court on this day. And I think it was like 2 weeks down the road or something like that. And so I went home, and I didn't even go to my brother's. You know, that totally bummed my day out because, you know, I planned on going to smoke some weed at my brother's house. Totally messed everything up. I just told my brother, just take me home, you know. And so he took me back to my mother's house and go in the house, and I thought, man, I need to call some lawyers because this is the 3rd time getting caught with marijuana. And that's like a felony. 3rd time offense is a felony, you know. And so I was real scared. So I got on the phone book and I started calling a few lawyers around town and talking to them. And I contacted this one lawyer. I told him it was my 3rd offense, that I got busted with marijuana. And he says, well, how much did you get busted with? I says, 2.5 ounces. And I had a scale on me and I had money and everything. And he's all, well, as long as it's under 3 ounces, it's not a felony. He said anything under 3 ounces is just a misdemeanor. He says just go to court and just plead guilty to it. That's all you can really do, and just you get put on probation or whatever. Just do what you gotta do. And I was like, all right. So I went into court, and that's what I did. I pled guilty, and the judge says, and he recognized me. He's seen me in there a few times before, and he's just shaking his head like, and he's all, why did you have the marijuana? Because I had the marijuana in 3 separate baggies. It was like I had an ounce in each.